Hello, thank you for joining today's executive webinar session, preparing to reopen your business after, and I will say during the pandemic, in the scope of digital, legal, and insurance consideration. This week is a special week, that is National Manufacturing Week. So today we'll be also addressing manufacturing industry and manufacturing-oriented suggestions and ideas as well. My name is Kevin Devecioğlu, and I am the Managing Director of Bimser International. Today we have a panel, and with my colleagues together today, I will be talking about how you can prepare your business, how you can open your business after the pandemic. With me today, I have Rob Tochowski from USI Insurance Company. So he's with us. He's the Vice President of the company. And also we have Will Newman from Becker Glynn Law Firm. He's an attorney and he's also with us today. So together we'll be sharing our ideas, suggestions, and some thoughts to think about with you. First of all, I'd like to introduce our company on a high level, and I'd like to just talk about a little bit about the digital considerations in this time, especially in the face of COVID-19. I'd like to especially focus on the performance management in these times of pandemic, I must say, which is actually very important for companies. So let me introduce our company first of all. I'll also talk about performance management digitally on a high level, and then I'll hand it over to Rob and Will, and we'll discuss further. So our company is Bimser International, and we are an enterprise software maker since 1998. We are based in New York. In a sense, we have companies adopt digital transformation and adopt digitization in their workplace. We are very active in various business communities, especially manufacturing, finance, banking, logistics, and other business communities are some of them that we are very close with. So we interact and engage with those businesses to learn from them and to see how we can help them in this digital age. I'm also myself very active in HILI, especially in Manufacturing and Information Trade Committee as a co-chair with my colleague, and I have a chance to interact with manufacturers very often. In addition, we have an internship program called University of Bimser International. We teach university students how to do pre-sales as well as software engineering. We have global presence while we are based in New York. We are also active in Europe, in Middle East, in addition to other regions. So we are a group of companies. We are a growing organization. European Bank is one of our investors. And we have also certain quality certifications, such as we are ISO 9001 certified and ISO 27001 certified. We are also very close to many different ERP ecosystems, SAP, Microsoft, and other ERP ecosystems that we are working with. Since 1998, we developed these products. These are the proprietary software products. We own the IP, we own the technology. We have EBA, that's our workflow and digitization platform. Anything that you do on paper or spreadsheets, we have you digitize and run in a digital environment. Being our asset maintenance and facility management software helps companies manage their buildings, machinery, equipment, especially we are in the league of manufacturing. It's a manufacturing week, and we help organizations manage their planned maintenance operations, for example, with the help of BIM. QDMS is our quality risk and compliance management software. It helps companies comply with various quality management standards, ISO 9001, SQF, BRC, IATF, and many other standards can be complied with the help of QDMS digitally, with no need of paper. And finally, we have Ensemble as an intelligent business process modeling and performance management. Two products actually join our portfolio recently. We have Contract Manager solution that helps companies manage and design and officiate their contracts in a digital environment. We have also Synergy, that's our brand new native cloud automation platform that is also ready. We are right now in the process of introducing it to marketplace. So this is what we do in essence, and digitization and digital transformation is our specialty, and that's how we help companies. We have been delivering thousands of projects since 1998. These numbers show how many projects we delivered by the end of last year. That also shows how many customers we have overall. So we have thousands of customers, and we have millions of professional users using our products in different operations. And our products work on cloud as well as on-premise servers. We have the latest technology since we keep investing in our products. So native cloud technology is very popular nowadays. It is because of COVID-19. Many companies work remotely. So we have that infrastructure to help companies, and we have been supporting companies to work remotely and operate productively, even though they're not in the office and working from home. We have many different customers, reputable organizations. These are just some of them. I just pick and choose. So these organizations put their confidence in our company, in our product, which we are proud of. And this is actually longer. I just pick and choose some of them. So we work with 3M, we work with Bridgestone, Nissan, Renault. United Nations is one of our customers, for example. We work with Unilever. We also work with Starbucks, and there are many other reputable organizations that we are working with. Also, we are working with many different industries. In addition to manufacturing, we work with finance, banking, professional services, food industry, and many other organizations in different industries. So before I hand it over to my colleagues, I just like to talk briefly about how they approach performance management in the face of COVID-19. So where we are coming from is actually a digital transformation, especially nowadays many companies working remotely, and digitization and benefiting from technology to be able to work remotely is very important nowadays. It's more important than before. So in essence, digital transformation is adopting an organization's strategy and structure to capture opportunities coming from the technology. So when we look at this, it's actually pretty straightforward. We need to adapt our company strategy and structure so that we can take advantage of opportunities thanks to technology. And there are benefits of adopting digital transformation. You can be more competitive. You can reduce costs. You can be more efficient. You can increase sales, for example. So there are many different benefits that your company can enjoy with the help of digital business transformation. So when we look at overall where we are and how we come to this stage of digitization, of course, that didn't happen overnight. It has been happening stage by stage. So it has been actually evolving. So when we look at this slide, for example, it shows how the evolution actually happened. So everything started with the revolution of industrial revolution, and then it basically started to expand to other nations, and it started to evolve, and it became Industry 4.0 nowadays. That's what we are talking about in this digital age, especially manufacturing and other industries. So it involves cloud technology, it involves cybersecurity, automation, and advanced software utilization, which is very important. So when we think about software products, software is everything. You may have the latest technology, latest computer or latest hardware, for example. You're going to have the software that is actually recent, updated, and has the latest technology. So this shows the evolution of how we come to Industry 4.0. It just became the mass production of commercial products or industrial products, and step by step with automation as well as thanks to internet, now we are able to work remotely without being in the office, and we can do many different things at the same time. Also, when we look at other professionals, what do they think about digital transformation? So there was an actually research about this, and Gartner actually released this information. For example, based on their survey, 67% of CEOs and CFOs believe that their business model will be changing because of digital transformation. And also, another important fact is that demographics also changing. So when we look at this, actually, the technology is changing, and at the same time, the demographics changing, and also the need of high-skilled employees. That is going to be also the priority at the same time. And that is more or less what we are experiencing nowadays because of the COVID-19. We are working remotely, we utilize the technology, and whether we have that skill or not, if we don't, we have to learn it, then we can utilize technologies to work remotely, even from work not being at office, for example. So nowadays, there is there was actually life before COVID-19, and there is the business life after or during COVID-19. We are still actually experiencing COVID-19 effects in our businesses and in business world. So before we were doing things and operating our businesses in a certain way, but because of COVID-19, it changed many different things. And many things that we weren't doing before, or we weren't paying that much of attention before, they became new normal. So first of all, the risk management is more important than before. Risk management is not something new, but right now it's more important than before, because if we knew, or if we were prepared for a pandemic, for example, in our organization, in our companies, maybe in our countries, for example, wherever we may be, then maybe we could respond in a different way, maybe in a more productive way. So when we look at risk management, there are different ways to, there are different things that we need to assess risk. Process risk management is very important. Environment risk management, health and safety risk management is another subject matter in risk management, for example. Pandemic and disease risk management. That's not something new, but we understand right now, and we know right now that it's actually really important. And IT risk management, our infrastructure, technologically, if we are ready, what type of risk we have, for example. So risk management has been important, and it's going to be even more important from now on. So when we assess the risk, we also need to put together a plan. If that risk happens, what we should be doing. Even before it happens, how can we be more proactive? Maybe we should take certain steps, preventive steps, so that risk never will be happening, never take place. If that happens, then we need to also have a plan ready so that we'll know what type of actions we'll be taking. And based on that, the employee training is going to be important, and it's going to be even more important than before because of COVID-19. Business trips is going to be another subject matter. Looks like we're going to have less trips, and even if we're going to have business trips, it's going to be more scrutinized, and there's going to be more levels of approval when we are having business trips. That's what we'll be seeing in coming months after COVID-19, especially. And another thing is, what we are experiencing nowadays, is remote work and performance management. So then you imagine you used to be able to work with your team members in the same location. They were seeing you, you were seeing them. You knew what they were doing, and you had a chance to engage and interact. Now, most of us working remotely, and performance management becoming actually more challenging. So, of course, there are different ways to run performance management. We recommend to run it in a digital way by using a software, for example. And that's one of our expertise areas, for example. And based on that, there are different steps that we need to be taken based on what we have been studying and what we have been observing, and we saw that customers actually became successful at. So remote performance management, especially, first of all, we need to model our business process. What type of steps will be needed to get the job done. We need to define it. We need to set criteria for performance management, and we need to assign it. These are the steps. And then we need to monitor performance continuously. You know, how we are basically going, how we are doing, how it actually is. Are we close to the targets, and how the performance going so far? So continuous performance monitoring is very important. And then when the time comes, of course, it's time to review performance. what was the target, what was the criteria, and how we are doing, basically. So this is overall how we are looking at the performance management. However, from the digital transformation point of view, these steps can be taken actually easily, digitally, with no need of paper. And you can assign tasks while you actually train your employees. You actually guide them, you coach them, but at the same time, the performance monitoring and also measuring can be happening at the same time. And it's happening at the same time, thanks to technology. So this is very important nowadays to utilize remote performance management approach. So that's my piece, and that's what I want to talk about on a high level. So what I like to do is I like to hand it over to Rob and Will. So they will talk about considerations when you are reopening your business, considerations from legal and insurance point of view. Rob, Will, would you like to take over the screen?
Sure. Thanks very much, Kirsad. Thank you. That was a very interesting presentation. Let's see if I can share a screen. Kirsad, I'm unable to. Oh, now I do have access to share the screen. So give me a moment. I'm going to share my screen.
Sure, you got it. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So I hit play, and then I will click. So I'm going to click share, and then I will click play. Can everyone see my screen?
Perfect. Yeah, looks great.
Fantastic. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Will Newman. I'm an attorney at Becker Glenn. And this is where Rob will say his name.
And I'm Rob Takashewski out of USI Insurance Services, Vice President on the property and casualty side of the house.
And a couple of months ago, Rob and I offered a presentation talking about considerations that businesses should have when reopening after temporarily closing down during the pandemic. And since then, businesses have reopened, and we've learned something from what they've gone through as they've reopened. But a lot of the lessons that were applicable earlier are just as important now, and we think that they bear repeating. So over the course of the next 30 minutes or so, Rob and I are going to discuss with you things that businesses should keep in mind to operate safely and effectively, but also an update since then as to what an insurance professional and a lawyer have observed from other businesses that have reopened. Rob, do you have anything else before we move on to the next slide?
No, I think that's a great segue into the part two piece of this.
Great. Well, before we go on, I want to talk to you guys just a little bit about webinars. During the pandemic, I don't think that we spend enough time staring right into a screen. There's several minutes every day where I'm looking at something in real life, maybe a person or out my window, and that's time that could be spent looking at a screen. And I want to thank you guys for participating in this webinar because it's also on a screen, and you probably have other screens to be looking at this moment. According to Google, we're supposed to look at our screens for no more than 2 hours a day, and children not more than 1 hour a day. So this presentation is probably therefore, because it's longer than an hour, inappropriate for children. So if there's anyone under the age of 12 who's watching this presentation about operating a business during a pandemic, I'd encourage you to drop off now and leave behind our adult-only audience.
All right. So with that, we're going to go into really the crux of when you look at businesses either now starting to reopen, or more likely just about all the businesses or most businesses are open in one form or another. When we had mentioned a little bit earlier, we started in the beginning of the summer doing this type of presentation as the heart of the businesses were just beginning to open, and so there were some things that we learned overall, whether you're a business owner, you're an employee, you're a customer, you're somewhere up and down the supply chain. as well as you're a service professional that's working with a lot of these businesses, there's things that we had learned and things that need to be reinforced and then updated. So this is an important facet, but two things came out, or two guiding questions came out before that still hold true now. Whether you're reopening for the first time or you've been now conducting business, two guiding questions to make sure that you are incorporated into your business operations. The first is, am I doing what I believe I'm supposed to be doing as a business owner? And really that incorporates not only obviously providing for your employees and providing the right product or service solution to a customer base, but now you're factoring in health, even more so the health and wellness of anybody either coming to your business or your employees or anybody that you're interacting with, even from a sales and marketing perspective. And then the second guiding question to constantly be revisiting, whether you're again reopening for the first time or moving forward, is if I accidentally or negligently do not do what I'm supposed to do. And it's very easy to get off track because of all the different things you as a business owner potentially or a company executive are dealing with. So it is easy to get off track, whether again accidentally or just negligently you put it to the back burner. But what could be the consequences both legally and financially? Because there are some serious consequences if you aren't doing what you're supposed to be doing. And I'll factor in you could be doing it and still you have there could be concerns or issues that come up that could potentially wind you up, in court or in the need of the legal profession, and my good friend Will. So with that, let's go over to the next slide. So really it starts with employee and customer safety. And really, regardless of the type of business you may be involved in, whether it's retail, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's a service provider, distribution, whatever it might be, you're going to have you most likely have employees, and you definitely have customers that you're going to be either meeting with or having to speak with and be involved with, and they could be visiting your site, picking up product. You could be dropping something off to them. However it might be. So really it starts with employee and customer safety. And there's best practices, and there's Will kind of alluded to the amount of webinars, and if you Google information about COVID-19, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of companies that are providing tips and background. And one thing I will say is to keep yourself informed and educated, because the situation is fluid, both from a federal here in the United States, as well as from a local or a state level, in terms of the things that you are supposed to be doing to keep your employee and any customers safe. So with that being said, first and foremost, have somebody that's designated, whether it's an employee or you're using an outside consultant, somebody that's designated to spend an awful lot of their time to implement and to take responsibility for managing the safety measures that you would be implementing into your business to start with. And there's best practice, and it includes, but it's not limited to, things such as limited or not even opening areas like cafeterias where employees or customers would congregate and potentially spread COVID-19. Daily temperature checks, mandatory testing and reporting, the various social distancing and potentially if you're in, say, an office environment, types of barriers, or plexiglass that may be put in place to provide that level of protection. And then, the big thing, minimize the number of people on premise, whether you continue to use telework or you're bringing employees back, but potentially bringing back in staggered shifts. So there's so many different tips out there. Really, you got to find the ones that are right for your business. But regardless of what you do, both from an insurance as well as from a legal perspective, we stress the fact that make sure that there's a level of consistency in any of the actions and the protocols that you take and you implement, and constantly revisit to ensure that your business and your employees are doing that. And that's why having somebody designated, not just yourself, but somebody else that's designated to do this, helps ensure that level of consistency. All right, let's go to the next slide, Will.
Sure. So just to add to that, you know, the easiest way to avoid a dispute with your insurer or a dispute with an employee or a customer or a supplier is to have a safe environment where no one gets upset, no one gets sick. Obviously, it's impossible to have absolute safety and still operate a profitable business. But if you're ever in doubt, you know, I urge people to take the precautions that are necessary to, you know, err on the side of safety, because a small amount of money or lost profits from having a more safe work environment usually will be cheaper than, you know, having to engage in, you know, have a loss that hopefully insurance covers, fight with the insurance company, or have a lawsuit or a dispute. So one of the issues that will come up as you reopen a business is working with your employees that may be hesitant about coming back because they have safety concerns, and making sure that the work environment is safe for them. You know, before coming to speak today, Rob and I were talking about how we were going to discuss this portion of the presentation, and Rob very helpfully reminded me that employees are the lifeblood of an organization, and so making sure that they are well cared for is in the long term a good strategy for a business. So in the event that your business either has had to engage in layoffs or is considering layoffs because of a drop in business, one thing that businesses should do is to consider existing employment agreements. You know, you may have signed an offer letter with an employee years ago when they joined, or had them sign a contract and then never thought about it again. And before terminating them, it's very important to review things like offer letters, employee handbooks, any agreement that you have in writing with the employee, or even agreements that you recall making that were not in writing should be considered, because if there are any sort of obligations, like you promised to employ them for a certain period of time, or to give them some sort of notice before terminating them, or to pay them a certain severance, you're going to want to consider those before actually terminating them. Another thing to do, and this is something that Robin mentioned a moment ago, is making sure that all of your decisions are consistent. I have worked with employers that terminate some people and not others, or grant some people accommodations and not others. And that is inviting someone to challenge the basis for their denials of their terminations. How come you terminated person A and not B? You know, person A will say, well, maybe it's because I was disabled, or maybe it was because I'm a member of a protected class. And so you're going to want to insulate yourself from these claims, A, by making sure you don't operate in a discriminatory way, and B, to avoid the appearance that you are, to make sure that if you know, any decision you make, if it distinguishes between types of employees, that you have a solid basis that isn't discriminatory to explain, you know, why you treated person A differently than person B. And it, you know, it may help to talk to a lawyer first, or to talk to an HR professional to make sure that that basis is one that's legally permitted, because there are challenges that arise when people think that something is legally permitted and it is not. Another thing you should do is when you bring back your employees, to work with them and make sure that they're comfortable with coming back to work. Now, since the last time Rob and I spoke, more and more businesses have been bringing their employees back on premises. And in general, employers are allowed to do that. But that doesn't mean that employees are going to be generally comfortable with it. Many are going to want accommodations, or explain that, you know, they live with an elderly person, or with a, you know, newborn child, or with someone who has a comorbidity and is particularly vulnerable to COVID-19. And I think that one thing you should consider doing is to make accommodations that are reasonable for employees like that. You are in terms of which ones are required and which ones are not, there's not really a lot of bright line rules, and I encourage you to consult with a lawyer when making individual determinations. But making sure that each of your employees is comfortable, and if they are not, working with them to see if there's a reasonable accommodation that can be consistently applied. And if there still is not, then in that case, I would reach out to a lawyer and see, what you can do to make sure that you can comply with the law and at the same time require your employees to come in. Another thing that you should be comforted by is that the workers' compensation scheme in New York and in several other states is generally regarded to apply to workplace health issues, including COVID-19. New York State is one of the states that offers disability compensation off of insurance policies to employees, even if they do not sustain their injury on the job. But employers should also make sure that they comply with laws like the FMLA and the FFCRA that require employers to provide leave to employees that are either too sick to perform their jobs or must care for someone that requires their assistance. At the same time, I'd be very careful about protecting the privacy of employees. So if an employee does contract COVID-19, you should obviously make accommodations and not bring them on premises where they can infect others. But I wouldn't share the name of that employee, with everyone because that person has privacy interests as well. Sure, that person may themselves disclose they have COVID-19, and coworkers will become aware that person A is not at the workplace anymore. But I would be careful being the person to divulge, their health information. Lastly, if your business received grant money because of the pandemic, I would make sure that you consult the terms of those grant programs when making employment decisions. Some grant programs prohibit you from terminating the employment of certain employees, and in making sure that you can use the money appropriately when bringing people back to work. Now, in the event there is a dispute, you may say, well, what do I do about that? What are the places that I can turn if an employee or a customer or a vendor either contracts COVID-19 and blames you, or doesn't perform like they said they were going to perform, perhaps doesn't pay an invoice or doesn't deliver goods, and points to COVID-19 as the reason why? The very first thing that parties can do is to negotiate, to make an agreement where both sides compromise. It's often the first instinct for businesses to not get a lawyer involved because lawyers are expensive, and there's a reputation that lawyers will make things more complicated, and negotiating is something that a business does anyway. I would still encourage businesses to consider using a lawyer, and that's because a lawyer may know what are the possible things that could happen if there is a lawsuit, and then negotiate appropriately. So in a regular negotiation, people may think, oh, if I don't have a settlement, I may not be on the hook for this much money, or perhaps a smaller amount of money than the lawsuit would actually provide. And a lawyer would provide, I think, a necessary perspective for someone. But ultimately, I think that whoever prevails in a negotiation, if a lawyer is not involved, is usually just who is more eager to avoid a lawsuit. If there is an employee that demands, the moon, $1 million, that person, a employer may be willing to go to a lawsuit rather than pay the employee $1 million. Meanwhile, the employee that would rather get money up front than avoid having to undertake the burden of going to court may be more willing to settle. So in both situations, whether you're the employee or the employer, I think it's better to have a lawyer that's aware of, what's a reasonable, what the alternatives are to the negotiation, and therefore can advise what's a good deal and what's not. Another alternative is to go to mediation, where a neutral third party sits down with both you, your company, and whoever you're having a dispute with, and tries to find some middle ground. Oftentimes in a negotiation, one person will be way off or have, unrealistic demands, and a mediator can help bring people's understanding of the other side a little closer to each other and find some common ground. I personally think that mediation can be expensive relative to the benefits it provides, but I'm in the minority in that position. Generally speaking, a lot of people recommend mediation because it can bring parties together and help them avoid a lawsuit. One of the worst alternatives, though, is going to court and having a lawsuit. Then you definitely need a lawyer. And litigation, even if you prevail, even if you're right and the other side is completely wrong, can still be very expensive, and it can be unpredictable. Even if you're right and the other side is wrong, you could still lose because a judge or a jury may not see the facts as clearly as you do. Another place that you can turn is you can go to your insurance coverage and say to your insurance provider, you know, someone has a claim against us, or we have incurred a loss, and insurance provider, you should, you know, cover this loss. And Rob, I think you should talk here about, you know, how that has worked during the pandemic.
So I'll say that, you know, first of all, having a good insurance policy doesn't necessarily protect you from everything. You know, understanding what's involved in each of those policies, whether it's a property policy or a errors and omissions policy or a cyber policy, it's important to understand you know, what is as part of that. So we always talk about reviewing with your broker on a regular basis and updating it as you go along. So first of all, better insurance brokers have a strong network of helpful professionals. So when filing a claim, you may be you may financially want to find out if, you know, you can really sustain any kind of payouts if you are, and what type of payouts for an employee issue, having a good accountant. There's a cyber breach or a cyber concern, something happens and you want to file a claim, but then how do you go about fixing it? So the better insurance brokers will have a strong stable of a network of companies and individuals they work with, and so tap into that. In terms of filing a claim, again, you know, you'll hear myself and Will constantly going back to the document everything. We talk about documenting everything because it protects you. It protects you from, you know, whether it's a month or a year or 10 years from now, when someone asks you what you were thinking and someone asked you what you did, having that piece of paper to go back to and reference is invaluable. So that's the biggest thing. But if, you know, again, depending on the type of claim you're filing, get your broker involved. If you're using or going directly to the insurance company, you know, work with the agent. You know, the difference between, and most folks probably know this, but a broker represents you. The agent will represent an insurance company. Not to say that agents are bad, and I no mean, just, you know, just the difference is that the broker will, you know, look to advocate on your behalf. A good agent will look to try to, but obviously they're, you know, they're getting paid by the insurance company. So there's a bit of a difference there. I think we're going to talk a little bit about it in the next couple of slides, Will, so we can go on to the next one.
So since the last time that Rob and I spoke, we've gotten some more insight as to how courts have been handling claims arising from the pandemic. So first of all, courts are open now, and they handle new cases. Earlier in the pandemic, courts had shut down, and they did not take in new cases that weren't, you know, a certain type of COVID-related emergency or similar actions. And now, if you have a business dispute, courts will hear them. There's very few in-person court hearings. Nearly all of them are done over the phone or through the internet or over, you know, Zoom. But courts do, you know, take in new cases now. And generally speaking, courts operate, you know, as they did before, maybe a little slower, but, you know, judges still hold hearings and decide cases. Plaintiffs still file complaints. Defendants still move to dismiss them. In the state court system in New York, criminal cases and civil cases are separate, but in federal court, the same judges hear both kinds of cases. And that's going to present a problem in the future because criminal cases have all been on hold because there have not been any in-person juries. And because there have not been any in-person juries, once the in-person juries resume, there's going to be a huge backlog of criminal cases that need to go forward all around the same time. And at that time, a lot of the commercial and civil cases are going to have to be on hold. And so there's going to come a time in the near future where the courts are going to get very slowed down for commercial cases, but that time has not yet come. At the very beginning of the pandemic, Governor Cuomo and other governors issued orders that stopped the statute of limitations for various cases. I think those orders have expired, but in any event, negligence cases and employment cases have long statutes of limitations. So someone could have contracted COVID-19 through negligence or been wrongfully terminated and not sue today or next month, and you as a business owner may think that you're in the clear. But that person may have 3 or 6 years to sue, and you may not really be out of the water until the statute of limitations passes. And even then, the statute of limitations may be extended for various reasons. If someone finds out in the future that they have a complication because of COVID-19, but they didn't know they had COVID-19, they may try to sue you anyway. There's not too much we can do about that, except for trying to resolve disputes early, as opposed to hoping that plaintiffs don't sue later on. One other thing that may be interesting to note is that this delay that people have in bringing lawsuits and they slow down in the courts, have benefits both to employers and to employees, both for plaintiffs and defendants. On the one hand, plaintiffs kind of want their cases to go quickly because they want the money now as opposed to later on. And the evidence that they need to support a case is usually easier to get shortly after an incident than far in the future. It's easier to ask a witness to testify about something they saw 3 months ago than something they saw 5.5 years ago. But there's also benefits to a plaintiff to waiting a long time. Every state has a different statutory interest rate that they apply for their judgments. So if I breach a contract with you and I am owed $1 million on the contract, when I get the judgment, I don't just get the judgment for the $1 million. I get it with a statutory annual interest rate. And in New York, our interest rate is actually relatively high. It's 9% a year, which is a very high rate of return. That's like, the S&P 500, that is a substantial investment rate of return. And so a plaintiff may be excited about the possibility of having a greater interest rate applied to their judgment. And that should be a reason why a defendant would consider making a settlement earlier as opposed to later to avoid having to pay 9% every year on an amount they would have to pay if they lost the trial. Lastly, there have been some court decisions that have come out during the pandemic, but a lot of the questions that we were hoping that courts would decide are still uncertain. So the 2 big ones that people have been looking for is to know what the scope of force majeure clauses are and how to determine whether someone got COVID-19 as a result of a specific workplace, premises, or interaction. So far, we're still waiting for courts to say whether a contract that has a force majeure clause, a clause that says that the contract can be voided if something like an earthquake or act of God or once in a lifetime or very rare incident that's difficult to predict occurs. And a lot of people have argued that COVID-19 is exactly that kind of force majeure. Others have not. But courts have been clear that force majeure clauses that have the specific wording of them says that they are voided if there is a government order that closes down businesses. Those clauses are enforced, and many force majeure clauses have that language and others don't. And in this situation, there have been very clear orders by governments shutting down various businesses. So if you are a party to a contract that has such a clause, I would look at that language and see if it has, language that describes government orders. And whether it does or does not, it would still be helpful to wait and see how courts rule on the application of those clauses. Another is causation. Now, in the past, a similar type of case that's come up have been asbestos cases. And usually plaintiffs' attorneys have had to establish if someone got asbestos poisoning to determine that they got it at, the premises that was owned or operated by the defendant. Here, I think it would be a more difficult situation because unlike asbestos, which was, in certain places, here COVID-19 is everywhere. And that will be a challenge for plaintiffs' lawyers, and courts have not yet really articulated how to establish, whether someone got COVID-19, from the defendant or from somewhere else. And that will be a challenge that courts are going to have to investigate soon. Rob, before we move on to the next slide, do you have anything else?
I would also add from the insurance perspective or side, two things. One is, as Will mentioned, many questions are still uncertain, haven't been answered. There's the overwhelming majority of court cases and claims that are in court right now relate to business interruption, and whether a policy should be paying out on, an insurance policy should be paying out on that interruption. And up to this point, in most cases globally, the courts have ruled in favor of the insurance companies that they are not beholden to have to pay out on claims of business interruption caused by businesses shutting down for COVID-19 concerns. And the reason being is that there is, if you look at the policies, when you think about a property policy and when it pays out, if there's a fire, specifically, there's a trigger that damaged the property. There's a physical trigger that a loss then occurred because of. When you look at a business shutting based on COVID-19, whether it was government major shutdown, or there was someone had maybe contracted it on site or was sick when they were on site and you had to shut the business down. Either way, there really isn't a physical trigger of loss. And that's what the courts have been basing that, the decisions on. However, there have been some cases that have, against insurance companies. So this is really an unsettled issue. It's going to be unsettled for many, many years. The bottom line is that in most cases, unless there's some sort of governmental backstop that's put in place, like for terrorism, I do not believe that there will be an overwhelming rush to have insurance companies forced to pay on a lot of these claims, because there really isn't or hasn't been a trigger, and it hasn't really been priced into policies up until this point. The second thing I just wanted to add real quick on to this point was when we talk about litigation from the last slide into this one, is your insurance policies call for, and insurance companies are obligated to defend when a claim or an issue arises. However, that obligation really ends from, so paying for legal advice or legal support. It really ends when your limits in your policy come due. So if you have $1 million limit or $1 million occurrence, once you reach that number, then you have to make the decision of whether you're going to settle or you're going to decide to, move forward and really be in on your own dime. So, limits and occurrences and the dollar amounts attached to them, something to be aware of. Okay, why don't we go on to the next slide, Will? In this one, I don't want to spend too much time on this because you can really spend an awful lot of time on it in terms of key components in managing business environment. I think that the thing to take away from here is think of a a perfectly equal triangle. Three sides are all equal. The angles are all equal. There are three key components that we see as really having to manage and being key to your ongoing business environment during this COVID-19. The first is managing the physical distance and making sure that you're holding individuals responsible and accountable for its enforcement and its implementation. And I harken back to the second slide where I said have someone that's kind of designated, but in this case not only have someone designated but also ensuring that you've done the training, that there's signs up, that there's you've actually done what you needed to do in educating and informing all about what type of physical distancing is needed. The second, I'll say key component and area of the triangle is the employees. You gotta, and Will spent an awful lot of time about the issues that arise from employees. As we mentioned, employees are the lifeblood of your business. So you really have to consider the risks associated with each type of employee and make sure that you're consistent when evaluating those risks and then acting upon them. The third is going to be the physical workspace itself. So ensure that you're inspecting everything. Update your surroundings. If you're putting in plexiglass or you're putting in walkway signs for one-way walkways. Regularly scheduled cleaning and disinfection and infecting and making sure you're documenting when you're doing, how you're doing it, even to the types of cleaning materials maybe that are being utilized. All those things count. So think of it as a triangle. Not all three are essential, are key. One isn't more important than the others. However, how you manage it and what you do is really going to depend on the type of business you are. Obviously, if you don't have a physical workspace where it's not a commercial office environment, perhaps there's going to be less of a focus there, but still there's going to need to be focus because you're always going to have some sort of workspace that people are either coming into or you're around. And then the last takeaway from this is, and again, it's I don't want to sound like a broken record, but document everything. Document your safety protocols, document your implementation, how you implemented it, when you implemented it, to whom you implemented it, and then keep those records. Okay.
During our last presentation, Rob and I talked about the fact that this may not be the only shutdown, that there may be second waves and even future pandemics. And so as you continue to do business now, it's important for businesses when they make contracts to address the possibility of another shutdown or another pandemic and discuss what will happen in that situation, as opposed to the current situation where the pandemic kind of took a lot of people by surprise. And so people had differing understandings about who would bear the risk and what would happen. And also to operate now as if you're setting a precedent. Now that we've seen how businesses have operated during this pandemic, then people will expect you to operate the same way if there's a shutdown in the future or another pandemic. So if you had layoffs before, people may expect layoffs in the future. If you didn't now, they may be surprised when they happen in the future. And you should make clear to your employees and to your vendors, what will happen in a future pandemic. And obviously no one has a crystal ball. A future shutdown or pandemic can be nothing like what happened this time around, but it's better to have the conversation than not to. Second, Rob, you want to talk about what happens with your insurance policy?
Yes. So let's even talk about I'll say no scenario, no two scenarios are alike. I'll give for instance, after you had the SARS outbreak, 8 to 10 years ago, and that was obviously a serious health issue. Some businesses actually wrote into their policies, and the policies were priced accordingly. That if there was another type of outbreak such as that they would have coverages for things such as I mentioned, with business interruption and being able to manage and how the policies were responding. Because now it's actually called out in the policies. But even some of those policies are questioned because of the way that they were worded And in, you know, even in terms of the amount of limitations that may have been put on there, not covering fully the cost of the interruption. So planning, and as Will said, having that crystal ball is you don't have one, but being prepared and just being aware and reviewing constantly helps. And as I said, working your insurance broker on a regular basis just makes good sense, whether it's planning for future shutdowns or that makes sense from just as business models change and are updated, and you know, there's additional risk with new opportunities. So take the opportunity to review policies now, sooner than later, to see any kind of scenarios that would take place and how long you'd be able to, you know, afford to be down, and if you are down, what kind of relief efforts might be available. You know, some of the reliefs that we've been working on with our clients and continue with when we review the policies is, hey, there might be opportunities to adjust or maybe reduce coverages if and where appropriate. And I'll use as an example, if you're an organization that has 100+ salespeople, for instance, and all of them have cars and they're visiting customers on a regular basis, driving, you know, to meetings and industry associations and all those good things. And all of a sudden they're working remotely and they're working from home and they're not using those cars. Having the same type of commercial auto coverages doesn't make sense at that point. So we had worked with our clients to, you know, reduce the types of coverages they had during the time that their business model had changed. The other thing too is pre-closing inspections on buildings. So if you own the property, then you have to close up for whether it's a short amount of time or extended amount of time. Make sure you're doing the right the pre-closing inspections. And you know, we kind of talked about water and electric on the last one, and obviously those are the easier ones to think about. But even things such as your security and fire systems, that make sure if you're most likely being monitored by a third-party company, that they're aware of that. Because if there is an alarm that's out, it could be a false alarm. There could be inappropriate responses from fire communities. So making sure you're doing the right inspections, you have that checklist of the things you should be, you know, closing down when you close down the building. The last part of this was the meeting market demand. And you know, as we say here, individuals may pay a premium for someone to address these concerns. And this is true. You know, with every unfortunately, with a lot of crises, also opportunities come out of it. And Kevin and his company is a great example of, you know, their focus and what they've done to help their clients during this time as their clients' business models have changed. So is Kevin and Bimser's business model, where, you know, I think one of the slides he talked about performance management, and before that, a lot of the focus was on, you know, on-site performance management, and now you have a lot more of focus and concern and efficiencies that you're looking to achieve from remote performance management. So, you know, when you're changing some of these services though, and you're changing some of the focus, understand that as you're adding services or you're adding products or solutions to address some of the needs that are in the marketplace, a lot of times it's going to require additional insurance because there's additional, you know, risks that are attached there. Remember, every new opportunity really represents new risks. Being aware of them and properly, you know, planning for and helping to mitigate, at the very least, you know, making sure you're aware of and you plan accordingly is really going to be the biggest takeaway from there. But there's an awful lot of opportunity that's out there to help service in a lot of different new needs that have arisen. Understanding doing that, you could be opening yourselves to concerns and considerations with an insurance impact or a legal impact.
All right, and that kind of takes us past 3 o'clock. So I think, Rob, do you have anything else? Because I think that kind of covers it on my end.
Yeah, I'm good on ours. We're available, as you see from our addresses here, and Kevin can share with anybody moving forward as well. You know, we're available as a resource, you know, to answer any questions and guide you in the right direction. We definitely appreciate this opportunity provided to us by Kevin and Bimser, and you know, having, you know, obviously it's good working with a stable of professionals that see things and are viewing the business activities from a different lens, whether it's from a financial lens, from a business development lens, from an insurance lens, and having them all in one room and under one webinar, I think was hopefully beneficial to the audience.
Rob, thank you very much. Will, thank you so much. It's been actually very educational. Thank you for your insight. In this Q&A session, of course, there are things that actually we need to address. Now, there are some questions that I received, and I'd like to also share with you. If we can address together, that'd be great. I'll also take my part as well. So based on your experience in the marketplace nowadays, what type of common oversights or mistakes that you've seen among companies when they are mitigating risk, as well as when they are open up for business nowadays during the pandemic? Some common oversights or mistakes that you have been observing. Anything that you'd like to share?
Well, I'll take that one first. Well, so from an insurance perspective and from what we see and from our clients and what we're doing with is that I will say that everyone has done across the board, regardless of the industry and the type of business, everyone has done a very good job in terms of implementing the right and newer protocols to fit their business model and to, especially when opening that business and to keeping employees and folks safe. The issue that arises, or what we see, is that there is a bit of inconsistency. And that's why we've kind of, one of the themes has been about consistency, is that, as the weeks go on, all of a sudden things start to get, not as consistent, whether there's a little bit of a drop off or whatever it might be in terms of the focus. So that's the biggest thing that we have seen, is just a little bit more of the inconsistency after that initial rush to the right safety protocols and doing the right things initially.
I would say, oh sure. One other thing I would add is that a lot of companies, I feel like, don't think about making sure their policies and treatment are consistent, and so that's one mistake I've seen them make. And I would encourage anyone listening to make sure that the decisions they make are consistent.
Thank you, Will. I appreciate it. One of the questions that actually I received was about digitization. So when you are going digital to work remotely, what type of common mistakes or oversights that you observe? So this question actually is a good question. So typically, in terms of adapting digital business transformation or being able to perform your tasks remotely, digitally, typically we focus on the technology in general. Like, for example, if you focus on the cloud accessibility, if you focus on certain software products or some hardware products, for example. Of course, these are important elements. The most important thing that I have been observing when we are actually deploying projects as well as engaging with clients and companies is leadership. So basically understanding the importance of digitization and leading the team towards the common goal is the major challenge. That's what I have been seeing in the marketplace typically. So that is something that most of the time missing in companies. So leadership is the critical thing. I will say the first element, the most important thing, I must say, to go digital, to go paperless, and to be able to work remote, especially from the point of performance management. That's critical. And then we need to sit and put together a plan. What type of technology that needs to be deployed, or what do you have right now, and how we can utilize what you already have. Maybe a software, maybe an update. Maybe you can just use what you have already, and then you can operate remotely. That's also an important thing to think about. Well, we are in National Manufacturing Week, and tomorrow is Manufacturing Day, National Manufacturing Day. So one of the questions is about actually manufacturers that I received. So based on your experience, how manufacturers should be ready for reopening? I understand actually, Rob and Bill, you addressed some of them in a general sense. So from the manufacturing point of view, anything that you like to add or anything you'd like to share from your based on your expertise?
I would say that making sure that your employees, whether they're on the production line to the back office or on the front lines, as part of sales, that everyone is aware of any of the new safety protocols that you have in place, and then understanding that they need to keep abreast of the updating that you will be doing to the safety protocols, and that they need to adhere to, and they need to live by them. That's my biggest piece of advice.
Thank you, Rob. Will, do you have anything you'd like to share on your side, or from manufacturing point of view?
Not in particular. I think that manufacturers are probably just, best served by following the advice that Rob had mentioned and that we discussed in the presentation.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So from the digital point of view, from technology point of view, I will say for the manufacturers, well, there are a lot of tools that can be utilized. Many things that we can actually monitor remotely without being on the manufacturing floor. Yes, we need to be there for manufacturing, but we don't have to be there 24 hours if we don't have to, for example. We can monitor many things remotely. That is critical. Also, some of the back office operations, for example, can be run remotely. You can have a chance to access your documents. You can have a chance to basically have certain approvals with a workflow operation, for example. Even with smart sensors nowadays, even if you're in the office, you can see many things: the temperature, the environment, the work environment. You can get a lot of information without even being there. I think from manufacturing point of view, being able to do many back office activities, or you can perform those tasks remotely, I think that's a great advantage by utilizing technology, which is very important. Also, Rob mentioned risk management and risk assessment, especially risk mitigation. So there are also tools that can be used for risk assessment and risk management from for the manufacturers, especially if you are complying with a quality management system, let's say ISO 9001, for example, which is risk assessment is mandatory to be certified. You need to think about many different risks, for example, in terms of your processes, in terms of environment, in terms of IT infrastructure. So that is also very helpful. It's a helpful exercise for as a business professional. It is also helpful for the health of the organization and to be able to be ready for any risk that may be happening. Of course, the idea is to be proactive. You don't want that risk to actually take place, so you can maybe take some corrective action, certain actions to lower the risk of that possibility, which is an important thing nowadays. Being productive is better than taking action when something happens instead of being reactive. That is for sure. Let me see. Well, there is a question about cyber policies. Rob, is there anything that you'd like to share about cyber policies in general about companies? Because I know it's pretty new for many businesses as an idea.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I could probably spend the biggest takeaway is that with everyone, and you pointed it out so well in the first part of your part of the presentation, was with everybody focused on the remote piece of performance management and where everyone working remotely. The cyber products that are protecting you today may not be the best suited for you to protect your business when you have employees and your business model now is more remote. And policies themselves, so cyber policies themselves, are very limited in coverages. So I would, I definitely say that work with someone who understands cyber policies to fit the policy to your type of business, meaning that there might be certain first-party coverages that would be afforded if there's a breach or if there's a ransomware demand or whatever it might be. But if it happens via a third party and you're affected, many times most of the off-the-shelf policies will not work or will not cover it. So knowing what's part of the coverages and then working to enhance those coverages based on the type of business you are. Cyber policies are very cost effective right now. And there's a big thirst in the market from a lot of the insurance carriers that are underwriting these policies for the business because they realize opportunity. So having the ability to modify policies and work and make suggestions on broader coverages for for a couple of dollars more really makes sense, especially if you want to tailor to the type of business you are.
Thank you, Rob. Much appreciated. So when we have cyber insurance, for example, does it cover, like, for example, something like ransomware, or does it cover any hacking-related damages?
So I'm going to give you the traditional, it depends, without seeing the policy and who's underwriting it. But most of the traditional policies that are out there, and they're, again, I say they're pretty cost effective, will have some level of coverage for if there's a cyber breach. So that with that cyber breach, there are dollars that would be allocated as part of the occurrence, that if you needed someone to come in to perform forensics to figure out what went wrong and how the breach occurred. There are, policies, I'll say just about all the policies cover a certain amount of that. Again, depending on how much you paid for and how much, coverage you got, will depend on how many hours would be covered. Same thing with, other things such as pen tests, doing penetration tests pre or post breach. A lot of that's a part of most policies. Most policyholders do not understand or recognize that there's certain services that you can get or are available to you for free of charge or built into the policies that they're not taking advantage of. So really the takeaway is that a lot of the basics, especially with first-party breaches or ransomware, would be covered. However, what I have found time and time again is that many of these policies really aren't suited for if there's a true breach. The cost of a breach will far exceed the coverages that most average businesses, even small businesses, are. If they are buying policies, they're not buying enough coverage for it to mitigate the costs.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you for your insights. Much appreciated. Well, I'm sure there are many things to talk about, and our listeners and attendees may have many other questions. So what we do is we keep our contact information on the screen. We have our email addresses on the screen. So if you'd like to continue this conversation, if you have more questions, you can reach out to us. You can send us an email, and then we'll be happy to discuss further. That is the idea. We keep our executive webinar session as educational, as informative as possible, so that we can all learn from each other and we can share our expertise with you. That's our goal. Looks like we addressed all the questions based on my notes and based on the questions that I have been receiving. Before we end the session, anything else that you'd like to add, Rob or Will?
No, just thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much for putting this on, as well as for everyone's time and attention.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. This webinar will be also available on our YouTube channel, and we'll be keep sharing with our communities and our contacts, definitely. Rob and Will, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it. Great presentation, very educational, great insight. It's always a pleasure working with you. But
Same
before
here.
we appreciate it. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we end our webinar session, I'd like to invite you to our YouTube channel. We have a very active YouTube channel. We have executive webinars, we have product videos, as well as short videos for you to learn about digital business transformation, automation, Industry 4.0, cloud technology, preventive maintenance management, and just like what we talked about earlier today, remote performance management and risk management. These are important things. These are part of our business, part of our work. We do it all the time. How about doing this digitally? How about doing it paperless? So we talk about these and many different forms on our YouTube channel. So please visit our YouTube channel and subscribe so you can be aware of what is coming next and what is available on our YouTube channel. Also, I'd like to invite you to our Eventbrite page. As you know, we have a lot of executive webinars sessions taking place on weekly basis as well as monthly basis. So please visit our Eventbrite page and take a look at our executive webinar lineup and any of them that you can register and join us. I'd like to thank you for your time and thank you for your interest. This week is National Manufacturing Week, which we are very excited, and we are always happy to work with manufacturers. We are happy to support them all the time. And tomorrow is National Manufacturing Day that we will all celebrate and enjoy. I'd like to thank you always for your attendance, for your interest, and looking forward to seeing you at our coming webinar session. Thank you and have a nice day.